Okay, welcome everybody to our Leadership Essentials webinar learning series. We're launching today. We have a series of, there's 4 webinars that we'll be facilitating over the next month. And this is the first one. We're going to be reflecting on assessments today. Now that we just finished up our PARC assessment, we're all finished with them as of yesterday, I believe. So we're going to have a little reflection period, and part of that conversation will be talking about our successes, what went well, challenges that we may have encountered, and then we're going to shift into talking about how we prepare teachers and students, and then also thinking how we can think differently about assessments in general, different ways that we assess our students. So just to have some introductions. My name is Diane Hauser. I work for the Boston Public Schools Office of Instructional and Information Technology with the Digital Learning Team. And I'm co-facilitating here with Blanca. Blanca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello everybody. I am Blanca Duarte. I am an Intel Teach National Trainer and also educational strategist for the Intel Education team. And we have worked on a series of workshops, these Leadership Essentials workshops, to really help technology leaders and leaders in school districts be able to implement different technology initiatives and programs, helping them plan out what they need to know.
Great. And I think that we're a small enough group that we can actually do some introductions here. So Cynthia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Cynthia Suhu. I am currently the lead teacher at the Josiah Quincy Elementary School in Boston, and I was just recently appointed the interim principal for next school year.
Congratulations.
Great.
We're very excited that you're going to be the principal next year.
Yeah.
We're cheering when we heard that news.
Great.
Long?
I am Long Yan. I was or currently am the project manager for Preparedness, so helping with the support strategy and the content of what teachers and school leaders need to know to effectively implement PARC.
So just a couple of go-to meeting reminders. We actually have a chat. You can ask questions. We encourage you to ask questions, to talk. This is a collaborative session. This is going to be a discussion more than it's a presentation. So please use our tools here to help facilitate that process. And if need be, mute yourself if you have background noise, and but this will also be taped and will be put on our YouTube channel as well. And you can change the layout view to presentation. You can change the layout view via presentation and participants as well at the bottom. So, any questions with that?
No.
Did anybody else join us? I thought I heard a little ding here if anybody wants to pop in and introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Liz Holman.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
Joining. We're just getting started.
Great.
So let's reflect. We're finished with our first year, and some of us actually, this is our second year with administering PARC. What went well? What was a success? Can you share a success with the PARC assessments so far?
So the successes that we had at our school was that we had the hardware, so we were able to get Chromebooks. So we had the hardware for the students to use for the PARC assessment, and we had a chance to go through their test nav to practice on some of the tests. So most of the students were familiar with most of the questions that came up and the format of how they were supposed to answer them. So that was successful.
Long, did you want to share something from a project management perspective?
Yeah, I thought that even though there were some initial challenges, students got it right away, like maybe day 2, day 3, they got the hang of the process, and that after like day 2, everything was relatively quiet from our support perspective in the central office. So that was really encouraging. Like the learning curve, I mean, their tests, I think Pearson made PARC really easy to use. So that was good. That was really encouraging.
From my perspective, from central office, I think a success was providing us, OIIT, and actually members of other departments, IRD and DNAs, providing that school-based support and being actually in the field while administrators and teachers were experiencing, going through the process for the very first time on the first day. I think that worked well. I mean, there were times where there were glitches that we had to resolve, but just having that personal contact and having us being able to reach out where there were questions was something that was successful with the beginning part. And also another piece for me was an observation. It was actually a time where people were starting to think differently, like just I feel like this experience kind of forced educators to start thinking, I need to be making some shifts in my teaching because, kids need to have other skills to be ready for this. So having the experience and having it be optional, but forcing themselves to actually take the park online versus on paper, kind of push the envelope on how they can think differently.
Yeah, and I think it's very telling that, when you talk about a delivery of an assessment, the fact that, Long shared and Cynthia, you shared that really the delivery of the assessment went really well. The actual, kids getting online, getting the support that they needed, even the fact that, teachers felt comfortable, being in a room where kids were online on computers and taking the test, and if they got stuck, there was a support there or they had instructions and guidance. The first time you do something, it's always a little scary and you don't really know, am I going to have the support there that I need? So being able to take care of those technical issues right off the bat, I think is really important, because then it allows us to really talk about the deeper, what we're really trying to do, which is, we want students to be able to use technology in meaningful ways, not just to take the assessment, to really be able to use it to do more in their classes. Liz, did you want to share something about the park assessments and your experience?
Yeah, one thought that I had that was maybe something that I think we'll get better at with this end of year assessment that we have coming up now is that between the different devices, there was sometimes confusion about which devices needed which kind of setup. But I think it went really well in that after one run through, most schools figured out, okay, on the MacBooks, I need to do this for setup. On the Chromebooks, I don't need to do much for setup. And we also had some other things where, like, there was one obstacle where people figured out, like, the kids would click all the way through, and then they'd finish before they were actually done. But it was really easy to figure out how to reset them to a new unit. And I feel like one of the successes was we figured out a lot of those glitches early, and schools were able to find the solution and then troubleshoot on their own. So handing over some of that autonomy to schools such that they could figure these things out in the moment was a really big success for us, that we had support there on that first day, like Diane said, but then we didn't have to be there as support ongoing, that schools were able to support themselves and figure it out.
Okay, so why don't we move on to talk a little bit more about challenges? Cynthia, do you want to start as a person?
So a few challenges. We actually ran into one. We started our end of the year assessment this week, or actually last week with the fifth graders. And yesterday was the first time that we ran into an internet connection problem where it was jumping around at, I think, a few different schools, but ours was one of them. So instead of having it administered first thing in the morning, we waited till after lunch and it was fine. But whenever we did run into issues with the internet connection, I think it's error 3050, we just had the students, just try to press OK and try to wait a little bit. And if that didn't work, we just logged them out and had them log back in, and it usually fixed itself that way. So that was one challenge. And I do have a second challenge, if I can share that.
Please do.
During the performance-based assessments, a lot of students had problems with typing in their answers for the open response or the essays that they had to write. And the box that they had for the answers was very small. I mean, it was probably only about 1.25 inches in width or in height. The height was that short, and then the width was only about 4 inches. This is on the Chromebook, and so for students who were writing long essays and long responses, it was hard for them to go and just check their answer as they were typing it. So one thing that we did was had them make use of the notepad. So they typed all of their essay responses on the notepad, was able to check it, and then they cut and paste that onto or into the answer box. So I'm not sure why the box was so short, because there was still, a good 3-4 inches below that, but we couldn't make it extend it any larger.
Cynthia, do you think that that was just on the Chromebooks, or was that something you found on all the devices?
I'm not sure we only use the Chromebooks to administer them, so I'm not sure if other schools also experience that or not on other devices.
Okay.
But I mean, we had the boosters in the school, and yesterday was just, I don't know, just out of the ordinary. That was the first time we ever had an issue with the internet connection. Yeah.
Liz, do you want to share some of your challenges?
I can jump in actually.
Okay.
I was one of the challenges that I encountered was some students, and this is at the beginning, this is on first day, when I was actually in the school on the first day, some students would finish the test, but really they weren't really finished with the test, but they would hit a button and they would get stuck in a cycle of having to either losing data or not being able to go back to the very beginning, so that until we kind of figured out a troubleshooting solution, it was kind of frustrating on students' ends, on the students' end in terms of, having gone through a partial part, part of a big chunk of the test, having to begin all over again. So that was a frustration also on teachers, from the teacher's perspective as well as the administrator's perspective. And there were some instances where a decision might have been made that they would, have actually not be able to complete the test. Did you experience that, Cynthia, at all?
We did once. Well, there were two things. A lot of students started to get sick. After they started the test, we had this happen to, I don't know, maybe about 3 of our students, where they started the test, and they either vomited or just felt really sick that they had to go down to the nurse and they were sent home. And unfortunately, they already started the test, so they were not able to complete it. So we did have to mark them down as complete and then write a note. So hopefully that their scores for that unit would not be, affect the school's total scores, I guess, or I'm not sure how they're going to take that into account when they do score them. But we did have a few students, because children, they're very comfortable with technology, and sometimes they try to troubleshoot on their own a lot. And so they just keep clicking, and they went on, and they just press okay, 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 and they kept going. And they didn't check their answers. They had some that were left, and we couldn't figure out a way to get them back on once they pressed complete.
Cynthia, I'm wondering how scheduling worked out for you.
Scheduling was okay. We decided for year 1 that we would only have 1 grade testing per day, just to see how it would work. I think next year we may try to have 2 grade levels at the same time. We're a large school, so we had about 7 fifth grade classes that were testing at one time. And so we do have enough devices for 2 grade levels to test during the same time. So we'll see how that goes next year. But this year, having that 1 grade per day worked out, although it does extend it a little bit to like 2 or 3 weeks for all of the test sessions and makeup. The timing was okay. The test frame that they gave us was fine.
Lon, did you want to share any challenges from project management perspective?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One was knowledge sharing among teachers. What I mean by that would be, one teacher would really know how to navigate the Pearson UI and know when, what to do when something bad happens. And then that information didn't get shared among the rest of the school, so you would have sometimes, multiple instances of one teacher emailing us and then another teacher emailing us from the same school, where we could, they could have level set it from, at school. And from central office, we could have done a better job at training more, maybe providing videos up front, and just making sure people know like how to navigate. Right? Just getting that knowledge out and sharing it and really marketing and advertising what's out there was a struggle. The second one was really around the UI. It's very nuanced, and so there are a lot of things you can't do that you expect you could do, like you couldn't edit a student's profile in a pop-up box. You had to click 5 times and navigate here and click another button. So that was very cumbersome and not very intuitive, and it just was a drain. So there was a lot of upfront, a lot of back-end setup that took away from principals and school leaders' time when it could have been focused on instruction. They spent a lot of time cleaning data, uploading data that, it felt very cumbersome, and we wish that could be better next year.
Yeah, and I think, all of these, since it is the first or the second time, we're still kind of in the early stages of trying to figure out what could be better so that we can give feedback back to the companies who are designing these tests and the back end pieces, just to make it simpler for schools. Because as Long said, you want administrators and teachers to really focus on instruction, not on the administration, which a lot of times when you use technology programs, you tend to have to spend a lot of time on setting it up before you can actually deliver it. And that really brings us to the next section.
Segue there.
Yes, we are going to segue into where we want to segue into is instructional readiness. So how prepared are our teachers with the skills that they need in order to be able to really support the meaningful use of technology in classrooms? And then how ready are our students? What do we need to do to prepare our students? And there's lots of ways that we can help our teachers prepare. And I think Diane's going to go through some of them. And I'll share some of the resources too that Intel has to help you.
Okay, so obviously, definitely PD, teacher professional development, without a doubt, is very critical. And I would even say it doesn't have to be separate PD. It's not technology PD. It's also it's integrated PD. It's how do we think differently about PD, professional learning, and how do we actually embed practices and digital literacies into any existing professional learning opportunity that is school-based or central-based. That's definitely critical. And then also access to devices and using them. There are a couple of instances where there was an aha moment where, did have devices in their school, and after the test, it's like you can't. It's not just using the devices for the test, but it's using them for learning, for teaching and learning, and not just for a test, so that students are used to using them all the time, and teachers are used to using them all the time.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that when we hold professional development, we need to definitely integrate the technology for teachers to also feel comfortable. In preparing for the PARCC assessment, we held 4 one-hour sessions for our staff to kind of go through a lot of the shifts of what was going to be on the test, but also allowing the staff to go through the test nav and practice the tests themselves to see what we're actually requiring our students to do and how they need to respond within this platform. So that was helpful, and we definitely need to continue to make sure that our teachers are exposed to this, that they're feeling comfortable, and that they have a way and resources to bring back to the classroom to allow their students to experience these or at least practice with the different types of questions that they'll have to answer. Especially with, you know, toggling between different essays and media clips that they put on there, how they looking through all of that and taking in all of that information. Is that something that we're already embedding within their curriculum? And typing skills was a huge thing. Looking at the words per minute by grade level, are they really prepared? Yeah, to have the typing skills, or are they, you know, relying on 2 fingers, things like that. So yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying.
To build on what Cynthia just said too, I think it's important then that those same, you know, skills, tools, activities are built into the professional development for building the curriculum too. So we want to do PD to prepare teachers to work in the testing environment and certainly expose them to the testing environment. But if we want students to be gaining things like, and maybe beyond typing skills, because I think most of our teachers have that, but you know, beyond that, are we engaging teachers as learners in digital environments that include, you know, reading complex texts and annotating them, that include some of the skills we want students to be able to do in the PARCC assessments? Is that built into how we teach teachers about their curriculum and how we work with teachers to improve their skill in teaching too? So I think that's an important thing to think about and sort of ongoing across the school year way.
If you think about the typical way that teachers have received professional development, it's kind of been what we also kind of complain about on the student side. So you have a professional developer who comes in and walks teachers through a variety of different steps and procedures on how to learn how to use a tool. You click here to do this, click here to do that. And I think the richer experience for them would be for them to maybe have some time to do some research right in that session on how to use technology effectively, perhaps for their particular content area, or how to reach those struggling learners and struggling readers. And something else that I think is important is you just talked about engaging them with text. There are certainly ways that we can engage teachers with text and model for them using digital tools the way that they can then model for their own kids as they're teaching. So I think we just have to look at and make sure that, you know, as we engage with professional developers, whether they're internal or they're external, is that we really talk to them about delivering that experience differently.
Actually, one thing that I was just thinking is that we also have to just encourage people not to be afraid of it. You know, we're not all experts at everything, and we have different entry points. So I think it's natural for educators to feel like they need to be an expert on something, and this is a perfect example of when we can kind of take a step back and be part of the learning curve as well, and have our students help us, because they're coming in with many of the skills that they're born with it. It's part of their blood, really. So just not being afraid, like knowing that you don't have, here's my quote, you're not getting from point A to point Z, but kind of taking the little steps along the way, the B, C, and D to get there. And how do we cultivate that?
So I think we also wanted to talk a little bit about, while we're talking about teachers, also talk about student preparedness. And Cynthia, I know that you touched upon this already, where, you know, what are some of the skills that our students need to have in order to be able to be successful? Again, not really for taking the test, although they have to have typing skills to be able to, you know, answer in a certain amount of time, but you know, what are the other skills that they need to have, like the digital literacy skills, like the research skills, like the ability to be able to read and take notes. Note-taking skills is so important because there are some supports built into that assessment, but if students aren't used to taking notes that way and they aren't used to engaging with text in a certain way, then it's really gonna show when they take those exams. So you know, what types of supports do you and Liz, do you feel, and Long, have you heard that are necessary for your students to really be successful? And again, not just in taking the assessments, but just in having that digital experience.
I'd actually kick that back to Cynthia since I work primarily as a PD provider.
Okay.
Some of the ones that you had listed, for sure, we did work on type-in to make sure that students were familiar with the type-in. Our computer lab has keyboards, and so, you know, moving from a keyboard and a mouse, a separate mouse, onto a laptop or the Chromebook was different. Some students were not familiar with using the mouse pad, and so we had to make sure that we had mice available for them to plug in and use. Yeah, and just going back to being prepared for this test, the park, and knowing that there were going to be multiple, you know, texts that they would have to go in between for each question, making sure that they knew how to look at those texts and take notes, whether it's, you know, on a piece of paper or making use of some of the accessibility tools that they had available, like the highlighter, and how to use that, because they did have to refer back to the text for a lot of their answers to use as evidence. Oh, drag and drop in. That was in a lot of them, where they had to drag either from the actual text, a highlighted portion, and dragging that as part of the answer, or dragging and dropping into graphic organizers. That was a skill that we practiced. Yeah, so there was a lot that we had to use, you know, to make sure that students were prepared before going into this test. And a lot of that came from just going through the practice test and knowing what types of, you know, things that they would have to, that they would be required to do. And we found some resources that we shared with the staff on ways that they can practice, like dragging and dropping or other things like that.
Anybody else?
I guess I can go. So like if I'm not thinking about the assessment, if I'm thinking about technology skills as, you know, like an adult or a college student, I would say like three main things. That one, a student should be able to communicate and create with technology. So can they create a Word document or presentation with technology? And then along those lines, can they share that content that they created? So those two go really hand in hand. And then the last thing I want to say is that, you know, students need to be, or at least as an adult, knowing where to go online to get the information that I need to be successful. Then I also need to independently be able to verify that source is credible. So being able to be resourceful, search and verify, and then also create what I curated for myself, or what I source myself. I find to be important skills into the classroom.
Yeah, and learning, I guess, talking through how to embed those teaching moments into a regular, English classroom, for example, when you're doing research and you're having them look online to find primary sources or other forms of, other sources of information in order to support an idea, I think is really important. So, and that takes time, so districts are now finding that, instead of sending kids maybe to a computer lab to learn those skills, or really trying to help their teachers be able to either reinforce perhaps something that students are learning in library media or in computer lab, that so that it's constantly being reinforced in classes, in their English class, their social studies class, or math classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would also bring up that we do have Google accounts for all of our students. So classroom teachers being familiar with some of those documents and how to use that effectively in the classroom. For what Long was saying, are they being resourceful on the internet? Are they able to, go in and share documents and create documents for a specific purpose? Those are all great things. So making use of the tools that we have, and Google Apps for Education is a great one. Yeah.
Definitely, I agree. I wanted to ask another question actually, and before we get into thinking differently, but it ties to thinking differently. I'm wondering specifically, Cynthia, from you, like, what would you do different if you were to administer the park tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
You want to do it again tomorrow, but if
Right.
you, what would you do differently to prepare teachers and students? Or,
Um,
or
Maybe not so much different, but making sure that that we are really making the shifts in the Common Core, um,
hmm,
and providing a viable curriculum for all of our students that are meeting those standards. Liz Holman brought up earlier about complex text and things like that, and I think that's really important that we need to expose our students to not just a variety of text, but also complex text, and have them digging in deeper, and extracting information in different ways that they might not have been used to before. I think that's really important, and that's that, the district has been working on for a while, and we just need to make sure that that's happening in all of our classrooms. And also giving students an experience, not just with paper and pencil, but also, are there ways that they can practice these skills using digital tools, um, creating them and experiencing them and responding to them.
Blanca, are we going to be thinking differently about assessments now?
We are. We are. So one of the questions that we wanted to ask was really in what ways do your teachers um, use formative assessments to inform instruction? So are they using technology? Are they, as they walk through their classrooms, is there a way that they're collecting data, perhaps using technology that's giving them information about their student, um, maybe over time, where they have some graphs and it makes it easier for them to tell where their children are? Are they using surveys? Are they using maybe some more traditional, formative assessments? Because I think it's important to kind of know what we're doing today and
Mm-hmm.
before we talk about where we want to be tomorrow, right? So Cynthia, if you wanna start that conversation off.
Yes, we've been big on formative assessments, and lots of progress monitoring, and really finding quick ways that we can assess where our students are and whether or not each lesson that we're teaching is effectively meeting our learning targets that we have for them. And one thing that we do have for our third, fourth, and fifth graders is Study Island. Um, so that's a tool that we have available for all of our students, where they're able to go in, and there are different types of reports that teachers can print out for their students, based on specific standards they've worked on and which ones they've mastered. You can also assign things on there or create your own formative assessment through their question banks, which we've also made use of. Some teachers are also utilizing um, Khan Academy. So there's a way that you can start a class and actually monitor your students on that. But so those are two digital ways that we kind of have used in the upper grades. And all across in all of our grades, we are lots of formative. I mean, quick quizzes, thumbs up, teachers going around, observing with checklist, or having one-on-one conferences, things like that. I think the Study Island and Khan Academy have been very useful because you can link it directly to specific standards. So you can see when students are mastering those standards and which ones you might need to reteach, or if you're noticing that data across your entire grade level as being low, you can decide on how you want to adjust your practice in those classrooms.
And Cynthia, I have a follow-up question. Is looking at the data part of your common planning periods? Are teachers actually looking at it together and having conversations, working in teams? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. So a lot of the data that we take a look at at our common planning times, which we meet once a week, are around the district-wide universal screenings that we give. And so that gives us a bigger picture of where our students are. And then as a team, most grade levels will create their own formative assessments to go along with what the data is showing us on a larger scale.
Okay, and so along those same lines of when we talk about these online assessments and benchmark assessments, what are some of the ways that your teachers are collecting summative assessments? What tools are they using? But are you using benchmark assessments? I know some districts actually don't use benchmark assessments. They're only doing the once a year, state test.
In our younger grades, kindergarten through first grade or second grade, we do have benchmark assessments that we have. In the upper grades, it's ATI that we use that's more standards-based for our summative assessments. So we actually at our school have been utilizing Google Docs. So we created a spreadsheet by grade level to track all of our data. Right now it's mostly universal data and some progress monitoring tools that we use. And some grade levels have also added columns for their formative assessments that they're using. And so each teacher will have a tab or have a sheet within that a spreadsheet where we're able to kind of track and look at all of the student data at once. And we also color code it so that we know which students are on target, which students need some interventions, and which students are well below that may need some intensive help.
And Cynthia, what about summative assessments?
So those are the summative assessments that we use. A lot of the summative assessments are like the end of units that we receive from the district. Some other ones, teams are working really hard on giving students options or multiple ways that they can actually demonstrate their mastery of a certain, task and stuff like that, or standards. We've been working a lot with Universal Design for Learning, and so that's one of our goals this year is really creating different ways that we can have students demonstrate their mastery through different tasks.
And are any of those ways, like do you have creative ways of using technology to demonstrate mastery at all?
Yes, some classes they are using to share their knowledge. Others have, let's see, what have they done? With technology, mostly through presentations. A lot of students feel comfortable with doing that. Some students have opted to do like a shared biography, for example, where they're working with a group on a biography where they have to demonstrate their knowledge of certain things that have to go into writing a biography. So some students have created a presentation on their own, but then had the option to work in a team as collectively to show their mastery of that standard.
Does anybody have any other suggestions or ideas on how we can contribute or how technology can actually be used to demonstrate learning in a creative way?
So one way I'll just share one way that I've seen schools really do kind of a wonderful job of not just making the assessment, creative, but also making it real world and relevant is teachers are asking students to create PSAs, for example, about a certain topic. And then, so it could be, why drugs are harmful, for example. And, students have to do the research. So they have the research piece of it. They have to, some of them will go out and do interviews, perhaps, and they'll put all of this information together. They'll get photos and facts and statistics, and they'll put all this information together into a movie, and then they'll post the movie on YouTube, and they'll share it with their community. So we see a lot of different ways that schools are really taking advantage of making sure that those summative assessments are, connected to the real world, that they're meaningful to students, so that the students are working on something that actually means something to them, whether it's a message or it's something that they can give back to the community. Another type of assessment that schools are looking at are this creation of e-portfolios, where students can then, as they're creating artifacts and demonstrating their learning, they're actually collecting the best pieces. They're being asked to collect the best pieces over the course of a year and then reflect on it. And so, over the course of several years, then a child really has the ability to go back and reflect on what they've learned over time, how their learning maybe has changed, maybe what their attitude, how their attitude has changed. And again, it's something that they're creating that they can take with them. It's not something that you're creating kind of in a vacuum where the teacher may or may not hang it up in the back of the room, but at the end of the day, at the end of the year, it's something that's going to end up maybe in the garbage because it doesn't really mean more than just, okay, I was able to put a couple of paragraphs together and do some research about a subject that's been done, some time.
To build on what Blanca was just saying, I actually was thinking about e-portfolios right when you asked that question, but I couldn't get back over to my computer fast enough to unmute myself. So I know we have teachers who are doing e-portfolios, and some of the most powerful examples of that we see is when they have students publish online. So when students actually create a website or create a movie or create a book or an ebook that they know is going to have an audience that they've defined for themselves, or that they define the topic for themselves. We have a team at Boston Latin Academy who I know does some really cool work around students sort of figuring out what a utopian world would look like, and they sort of build a dystopian world and figure out a problem in the world and then imagine how they would fix it. So they build this whole symposium project around that. And part of what they do is create a portfolio where they're building a site where they show what this world looks like, and they do this in all sorts of interdisciplinary ways. They pull in from math and science and humanities and English. And so I think one of the most powerful ways to really have students show their learning and illustrate what it looks like is when they create a product that they're really proud of, that they get to publish too, that has a real audience. And this can be done at the elementary levels too. Certainly it just requires a little bit more thinking about how student identities are wrapped up in what they create, and how students define that audience. Maybe it's as simple as parents or a couple members of their community, but that audience piece is really important. When students feel like they have a real world audience, they get really invested in what they're doing.
And also, I don't know if anybody's familiar with choice boards at all, but I actually observed a school implement an assessment tool by having students pick how they're going to demonstrate their learning. So the teacher would set up a board with different choices where they could create a podcast or an iMovie or even write an essay, but it was the student's choice in terms of which would be the best tool or best way that they could show evidence of their learning. And I like that. It's also like I like having ownership of how I'm going to demonstrate my learning, or I feel like that gives ownership on the students as well. Cynthia, is that something that you're familiar with? I've seen it as a UDL strategy.
Mm-hmm. What, the e-portfolios or?
No, the choice board.
The choice board, yes, absolutely. That's what we're trying to move towards right now, of really giving students choices to show evidence of their learning, and yeah, it's a lot of work on the teacher end to really prepare that and trying to make sure that the task that we're having them choose from is actually going to be able to demonstrate their learning. Yeah.
Well, just so that you know, the Lion is a resource for you. They've, I know that Deb over at the Lion had actually had that as a professional development for teachers last year, and teachers implemented choice boards. So if you're interested in learning more about her implementation, I'm sure that she'd be happy to speak with you about that.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good time too to just talk about kind of the goals that you have for your schools in terms, right? So, so in terms, as you reflect on both on kind of the, the implementation of PARC, on how that went, on what some of the challenges are, and then really talking about the instructional pieces. So what else do we have to do to continue that message of, wanting to implement technology, not for technology's sake, but really meaningfully? How do we help teachers shift, and go from a real teacher-centered teacher with all the knowledge classroom to one that's really more about the students, and the students taking ownership and taking directions and making suggestions. And I think, Liz, when you talked about, students really talking about the type of audience that they want for their product, I think that's so powerful. So how do we involve students more in those conversations? And it looks like, just from listening to you and to Cynthia speak, and Diane, you too, that those shifts are starting to happen. So maybe this question is for Long then. What are some of those goals then as you move into phase 2 of implementing, PARC? What are some of the goals that you're working towards?
Yep. One of the things I've been really thinking about is more upfront webinars, or maybe even virtual trainings, or even recordings of how to use the PNS system. I think I waited a little bit longer than I would have liked, and that's why people didn't get the information that they need. So more of that upfront, recording that people can just watch on their own time, something straight to the point, or maybe even leverage what's out there already in even YouTube. I'll try to verify what's out there, but just you leverage what's out there and share that information and get folks to adopt and use it. So that's my biggest goal, is just to get that information out there. And I think I saw students were fine for sure. It was just really around the setup and the nuanced things within the system that could have been that made things a little bit cumbersome.
Okay.
Blanca, I'd like to contribute to that question, if that's okay. This is Ed. The thing about your first line of that last slide about the vision that leadership has to create, it's also the idea that the leadership has to embrace these authentic audiences, everything that we're talking about, engagement factor as leaders, using Web 2.0 to create a culture in the school that supports the type of innovations and dedication to innovation that they want to see in their classroom. So I think we have multiple tiers to be working at in order to foster that culture in the classroom. It has to happen with leadership as well. And I like what's starting in the district, the conversations that are starting, but I think we really have to have a focus on developing administrative leadership that embraces technology and sort of drop some of the guarded fears and cautions about having students online and teachers online. We know in the real world they're online, and we as adults are online constantly. So we need to sort of foster that culture that we have in our own lives to facilitate learning at our schools and leadership as well.
Very well stated, Ed. Couldn't agree with you more. I'm sure that we're all on the same page.
We're all nodding our heads.
Yeah. And so a real, important goal, and not just for Long, but really for the administration, is, how can you help everyone be able to really lead with confidence, instead of kind of being held back by fear, because all of these technologies are new to many of us, right? I mean, we're adults, so adult learners, we have to look at that perspective a little bit differently. But as you can see, I mean, this might be the first time you've ever attended a webinar, perhaps, and even spoken on it. And, after the first time, you realize, what, it's okay if it's not perfect. But it's a wonderful chance to really be able to share ideas and share what's happening, because other people can learn from it and grow. So it's, building that confidence, but you have to be able to provide those opportunities.
And we have more coming up, actually. We have, for this series, we have 3 more webinars coming up, 1 a week, The schedule is on the screen right now. We have one next Wednesday. We have them mostly on Wednesdays, except for the June 4th. We have personalizing learning with technology on Thursday versus Wednesday. I hope you can join us for them. And then beyond that, we also have regularly scheduled webinars with digital learning specialists Liz Holman and Ed Considine, and we have one tomorrow on managing Chromebooks. Ed and Liz, I forget the title. I don't know if you want to share the title out, please.
The title is Managing and Leveraging Chromebooks for Engaged Student Learning.
So if you or any of your teachers, Cynthia, want to participate in that, please share. They're also going to be videotaped, and they'll be hosted on our DLT Digital Learning Tube YouTube channel, along with this one and this series. So I have the link in the presentation. And if you are not subscribed to our digital learning newsletter, which I think you are, Cynthia, but if you're not, you click on the digital learning newsletter link here, and you can subscribe. And the digital learning team actually pushes out a newsletter with tips and tricks. We have a theme of the month, and this month it's actually social media. So lots of good information coming out through the DLT newsletter. And last but not least, I wanted to just share that we're actually embarking on a new project defining what it means to be a digital district. So we're facilitating focus groups and talking with our stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, administrators, central office staff on what does it mean to be a digital district? What does that mean? What shifts are involved? And we have a survey that we'll share with you, as well as hope to have you participate in any focus groups that we have. We have a couple of principal focus groups tomorrow, but we'll share that information as well. I will have all these links. Actually, they're in the presentation, but I will have all these links in that doc that was shared out about this series, and as well as we'll be building a landing space to use as a resource as well. So thank you, everybody, for participating and joining today. I know it's the end of a long day. I don't know if anybody has any questions before we end.
No, well, I want to take an opportunity also to thank everyone for their contributions and for participating. I think it's a really, it was a fantastic discussion. Diane, thank you for facilitating. You did great. I know that that you and I are looking forward to the other 3 webinars and really hearing from the schools about things that they're finding that they're doing really well, and other ways to help find out how you can better support them. So thank you to everyone who joined.
And thank you, Blanca, and thank you, Cynthia and Long and Ed and Liz for joining as well.
Great. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Nice job. Appreciate it.